Damien Thorne, you think these guys like the Omen movies a bit much? Chicago's Damien Thorne really only put out one album during the classic era. This one. But it is a known quantity amongst serious metal fans of the time and should have been the start of something longer lasting. I mean, his band is still around to the best of my knowledge, but only after many years of inactivity, which is kind of the case with bands like Nasty Savage and Pile Driver. We've seen this before. Bands go away forever, and then they finally come back out of nowhere. Now, the sound of the record has elements of speed metal, thrash, and traditional metal, but all of that seems to be really contrasted by this incredibly glammy image they had at the time. There were other bands of the era that had that look, that whole, we look like this, but we don't sound like this kind of thing. I'm looking at you, first album Cinderella. Suffice it to say, don't let the back cover of this album fool you. It's definitely metal. Favorite track would be the title track, as well as Escape or Die. On the downside, the production isn't really all that good, but the songs do make up for it. It's kind of a similar situation to Kiss and their Hotter Than Hell album, which really also suffered from really bad production, but with otherwise good songs. Then again, more modern listeners are sometimes pretty tolerant of those severely lo-fi black metal efforts, so compared to those, production really isn't that bad. The debut album from Tygers of Pan Tang is a hallmark release in the new wave of British heavy metal scene. Like their contemporaries, they're definitely hard rock, but with a severe metal edge. And when I hear them, I hear a sort of strange combination of AC/DC meets Motorhead. And what's not to love about the album cover? I mean, that cat is wild. I discovered this band a little later on in my metal fandom. I was going to an alternative school in Reno, Nevada during the first half of 1986, about 3 nights a week, and a dozen other kids I was with could have easily stepped off the set of the movie Summer School. One kid's name was Jesse, and he used to call himself a death punk, which is kind of exciting, I guess, for him. But he did listen to some metal, and he was at that point in time particularly excited about this very band. Very vocal about it, couldn't wait to show me the band and let me hear them. Weirdly enough, I'd never heard them at all until this point, and I'm pretty sure that, since they have a band name that isn't exactly forgettable, I expected little because of the name, but I was really surprised once I heard a tape that Jesse had lent me. Although their second album, Spellbound, is often the fan favorite, Wildcat is where things begin, and it has some really strong material in its own right. My favorite track is definitely Killers. While the vocals are serviceable, they're kind of the weakest link in the chain on this album. This is also right before they got John Sykes on guitar, too. You might recognize the name. Sykes was in Thin Lizzy for their final album, as well as in Blue Murder later in the decade, but he's best known for his time in Whitesnake, playing on Slide It In, as well as that ridiculously successful 1987 album. If you want to hear Sykes in his early stages, Spellbound is where you start. Again, Wildcat is a decent album, but they markedly improved with later releases. The third album from the German power metal band Running Wild was an abrupt change, to put it mildly, from satanically inspired lyrics and image to a pirate theme. Yes, pirates, as in Pegleg, Eye Patch, and Aye Me Buckos. The stranger part is that the whole pirate shtick didn't just go for one album and tour, it continues to this very day. In fact, an entire genre of metal is named after it, simply known as pirate metal, which includes such bands as Lagerstein, Ailstorm, and Swashbuckle. Go ahead, Google them. See if I'm kidding. Since the descriptive pirate metal really tells you, well, really nothing, it's better to say that they're pure power metal and that they were highly influential on a whole lot of bands after them for decades to come. Favorite tracks are the title track, Raw Ride, and especially Diamonds of the Black Chest.
Diamonds, diamonds, diamonds on the black chest.
This was actually one of the last 3 albums I bought before my family threw away my collection in 1987. You know that story because it's pretty much the premise of this whole show. It's why it's the reacquisition project, the last 30 years being that. The other 2 are King Diamond's Abigail and Halloween's Keeper of the Seven Keys Part 1. As you can see, yep, that's me at 18, looking rather content with my finds outside the long-since closed-down Strawberries Records and Tape Store in Shrewsbury, Mass. Under Jolly Roger is a fantastic album. There's really a sign of real musical maturity here from the previous 2 albums. I mean, I love those 2 albums. I think a lot of you might as well, but they really came into their own on Under Jolly Roger. And you could tell they're firing on all guns at this point forward. And along with bands like Manowar and Halloween, really gave a big boost to power metal and the genre that built later on, decades later. And of course, we should also give credit to Judas Priest and Rainbow. I mean, they pretty much built the foundation of power metal. And without those 2 bands, we wouldn't have Running Wild and all the other power metal bands. So, cheer to them. The 6th album from Accept really came on the heels of a highly successful album known as Balls to the Wall. But it just didn't get the same reception. It spawned a music video for the track Midnight Mover, a video guaranteed to make you utterly dizzy and probably should be avoided by epileptics. Coincidentally enough, this is also my favorite track on the album. And again, fans often cite Balls to the Wall or the previous album, Restless and Wild, as their favorites, but Metal Heart shouldn't be counted out, despite its rare attempts at mainstream music writing, such as the somewhat pandering Screaming for a Love Bite and the utterly odd Teach Us to Survive. Bigger fans of the more established sound will enjoy Wrong is Right, Living for Tonight, Bound to Fail, and even the title track. A little aside, Accept is the very first metal band I ever saw live. A guy in my social studies class sold me an extra ticket, and then we went to the show together, and after that we became best friends, and we're still friends this day. So, metal makes you friends, kids. The show itself was back in 1984 during the support of, again, Balls to the Wall, but opening for Ozzy, who was on his Bark at the Moon tour. I'd already seen the music video for Balls to the Wall and was definitely pretty psyched about Accept. Needless to say, I was definitely not disappointed with their live performance. Though I really did want to see Udo come out on a swinging wrecking ball. But alas, it was not to be. It should be fair to state, too, that Accept at this point is kind of flirting with mainstream music sounds, like a lot of other bands at the time. Judas Priest is certainly on that list. Motley Crue did it. Even Twisted Sister did it. All of those bands had more accessible albums at the time. Turbo, Theater of Pain, Come Out and Play. The difference with Accept is that the flirtation is only slight, and there's still plenty of actual metal to be had. If you brushed off Metal Heart in the past, give it another spin. It's worth it. Certainly most of you have heard of Anthrax. New York thrash metal band, one of the big four. Named themselves after a disease in a textbook, blah, blah, blah. But I mean, let's face it, the band's a legend at this point. And with classic vocalist Joey Belladonna back in the band, they're really better than ever. But before Belladonna, and even Frank Bello, there was an earlier lineup and an earlier album, their first to be exact. And that album was Fistful of Metal. Anthrax's fledgling effort really reflects where the band was at the time. They were a little less technical, there was certainly less production value, and they had a different singer, namely Neil Turbin. Turbin's more aggressive style is miles apart from the falsetto-reliant pipes of Belladonna, and parallels here can be made in this respect to Iron Maiden, Faith No More, and Deep Purple, whose replacement singers ultimately improved the band's overall standings. Regardless, Fistful of Metal remains a real contender, and it might be that its raw energy is actually a feature and not a bug. Like Metallica, Anthrax was also influenced by the new wave of British heavy metal. And also like their big four compadres, they took that influence and turned up the speed, aggression, and power even more. Imagine Diamond Head on crack, Blitzkrieg on amphetamines, Sweet Savage on, well, you get the point. Although the next 2 albums, Spreading the Disease and Among the Living, did get considerably more attention and are the likelier fan favorites, there are many solid tracks on Fistful of Metal. I mean, Barring the lackluster Alice Cooper cover of I'm 18, which really does not belong on this album at all, it's a near-perfect record with a consistency of great riffs, as well as hints to Benante's drumming abilities on future albums. My favorite track is, of course, Metal Thrashing Mad. I bought this album when it was brand new, and it was definitely the cover art that did it for me. But after spending some time with it and really looking at it, it was clear to me that there were some real logical errors in the illustration. Not just perspective issues, but the awkward stretching one would have to do to position those hands that way. Seriously, try it out just like the cover shows. You'd have to be a contortionist of the highest degree to do that. Decades later, I'd run into interviews with band members who had the same observations, notably Charlie and Scott. Maybe it's 2 right hands and there are 2 assailants? Beats me. Or, maybe I should just enjoy the album, huh? Right? I first saw Anthrax live a bit later on. I saw them on the State of Euphoria tour in support of Ozzy. I wasn't the biggest fan of that album, but it was great hearing the other tracks in concert. Except for those jams. Not a winning fashion choice there, fellas. Neil Turbin really was their Paul Di'Anno in a whole lot of ways, and that's okay. I love the first couple of Maiden albums, and I love this album too. Listen to it again sometime and let it punch through your skull with all the crunch and heaviness it's got. Testament is another one of those bands that, although not a part of the Big Four, is really worthy of high praise. Not the least of which for the glaring musical acumen of Alex Skolnick. I think most of us can pretty much admit that. Take him out of the picture and it simply isn't Testament. Thankfully, he's all over this debut album, as are all the other talented gents with matching legacy tattoos. It's well known that the fan favorite from Testament is the second album, The New Order. The songs are even better on that one, and somehow Alex Perialis got some mixing lessons because the production is far superior to that of the Legacy. Speaking of which, that's the only real downside of this first album. Great songs, but mediocre production. Standout tracks are Over the Wall, Alone in the Dark, and Apocalyptic City, but for me, the favorite track, hands down, is Burnt Offerings. Didn't get to see Testament live until the Practice What You Preach tour with Annihilator and Wrathchild America. Except that my pal and I didn't get to see Annihilator at all because of the line going to the club. It was moving too slowly, and by the time we were in, the set was over. Incredible show. Truly lucky to see them in a relatively small club setting. All 3 bands, actually, but especially Testament. If there was a big 5, and I know people have gone through this before, but why not here? Testament would certainly stand alongside Slayer, Metallica, Megadeth, and Anthrax. I think that's an assertion that few would refute. The Legacy was certainly an omen of things to come for this band, and rest assured, a very good omen. Just not the Damien Thorne kind. Make sure to listen to the Vintage Vinyl Vivisection podcast, as a guest and I focus on a different album every episode. Band facts, production, personal stories, you name it. V3 is one of the 3 public podcasts I produce, all of which can be found at accusationnetwork.com. And now, our classic pick of the month. Venom's box set, Here Lies Venom, was released in 1985 by Combat Records, and with artwork throughout by Ed Repka, an artist who's done an obscene number of metal album covers for such bands as Death, Violence, Evil Dead, Massacre, Possessed, Nuclear Assault, and many others. The main interior piece is called The Earthly Remains of Abaddon, Kronos, and Mantis. It could probably be safely assumed that they were buried alive. It's a 4-record set, including the first 3 albums, that is Welcome to Hell, Black Metal, and At War with Satan, plus a picture disc version of their American Assault EP. The set is limited edition of 5,000 copies and numbered. Mine is number 1432, in case anyone gives a crap. The LP records have a total of 7 bonus tracks, well, bonus tracks at the time. They're on CDs all over the place now. The songs are Innomine Satanas, Bursting Out, Manitou, Woman, Acid Queen, Bloodlust, and Die Hard. I love that the epitaph on the cover reads, died 1985, because this collection really does end a specific era of the band with the original trio. A great collection of tracks from this band in their heyday. Get it, if you can.
There is a dark corner where secrets hide. Whether forgotten or seldom noticed, these offbeat details of the past remain, to be found by the curious and the receptive. Strange moments in cultural history is the class you never took in high school. Grab a seat up front and turn off your brain as we fill your head with tales of oddballs, villains, outcasts, flops, and other lesser-known events in this thing we call human existence. Find this and other podcasts at accusationnetwork.com.
In more recent releases, well, old material in a newer release, rather, 70s Tapes is a collection of demo tracks by Angel Witch from 1978 and 1979, from various reel-to-reel recording devices recorded in their native South London. 7 tracks in total, including classics such as Extermination Day, Sorceress, and White Witch. This collection was originally released in a digital format in June of 2017, but then committed to vinyl 6 months later. Vinyl color variants are clear, purple, metallic silver, and silver with black splatter, which is the one you see here. Another great band from the new wave of British heavy metal scene, most notably on their self-titled debut album. This early material from Angel Witch well represents the best lineup of the band, even in their raw versions, and it's really great to hear this influential band at the beginning of their career. This first episode of the Vinyl Reacquisition Project has been made available to all audiences. If you wish to see future episodes of this program, be a patron of the Accusation Network by going to patreon.com/The Accusation Network. There we also have a wealth of audio podcasts exclusive to our patrons. Hope to see you all next month.